Maybe, I don't know. I felt like I slept well. Maybe there's ancient raisin recipes, though. We're going to cover a lot of ancient ground today.
I am so interested. So it's not very often that I've met like a game expert or a board game expert, right? We have Eric Poses, and he created Loaded Questions. It's like the official game of the Backpack Show. But I never really thought about games that they found in like pharaohs' tombs and, ancient pastimes and stuff. So when I came across Eli Gurevich's blog, yes, Ellie Gurevich's blog, I was like, I need to see this. I need to talk to him.
Yeah,
it's so interesting, like the rules of gameplay and how you figure out what they were when you just find the board. And I don't know, I had questions.
I mean, one of the games I saw on his website looked like, the case that you'd put a dozen eggs in. Yeah. And I think that reminds me of a lot of more, games that we've seen even on our shelves now, but this must be the older one. And then
Mancala, maybe? I don't know.
That's the one I'm thinking of, Mancala. And then first we have Jill Hopkins too, who's like this media powerhouse. She's like made all these shows, been all these things, done all this stuff in Chicago. If you've ever heard The Moth, she's involved in that. She has her own radio show on this place called Vocalo, where she does some really good music. I want to hear about how she puts together a show. Just recently interviewed Carlos Santana, so I got to ask a question or two about that. Also a comedian that Jerry Seinfeld said was funny.
Oh, Steve Garfield of SteveGarfield.com is here.
There it is. Diane Brogan's here.
Mom.
She beats out Steve Brogan for showing up on the show. So I think
he'll show up.
You say now.
Maybe he's.
Backpack Show. Ha!
And I like to tempt you by taking a really long drag off of water or something while that's
right. Hi, Nancy Ramsey. See, Nancy?
While I'm drinking water. Hi, Nancy.
I accidentally faked out Nancy and had her think I actually cut my hair to a manageable grown-up people level, but I didn't.
Oh, no. What did you just like slicked it back or something?
Yeah, it was just a little bit wet yesterday. I don't know. What can a guy say? Carol's here. Bonjour. No. So we're going to grab our friend Jill.
Carol sent me some amazing bagels like 2 weeks ago. They are gone.
Those bagels have already come and gone, right?
Yep.
Well, I guess we'll learn how to make some from Ellie a little bit later, except the ancient version.
Yes.
Let's grab our friend Jill Hopkins. Hey, Jill, how are you?
Hi, Chris. Hi, Kerry. How are you?
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good.
Thanks for being on.
Len.
Author Len Joy's in the house. I grabbed you for a few different reasons. The reason I wanted you to come on the show is just because you're doing so much work right now. You were, people say they're busy, and I'm like, yeah. But you're doing a lot of things. What makes you pick up the projects you do, and what makes you kind of settle on the choices you're going to make for the kinds of work you're doing right now?
I try not to. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I try not to do anything that I don't enjoy. If I found out somebody else was doing a thing that I turned down and I knew I'd be jealous about it, I'll pick up that job. And lucky for me, I live in a place where lots of things happen all the time, even when we're stuck at home. And extra lucky for me that people seem to enjoy working with me and ask me to do cool stuff, and that I'm able to. I'm just fortunate every day.
So one of the projects you're doing are Jill Afternoons on Vocalo.org. I want to hear a bit about it. I want to hear about what goes into the show. And do they just at this point, because of all your experience with radio and podcasts and all that stuff, do they just say, give this woman a show? Or do you have to pitch it? Like, how does that work?
Well, I've been with this radio station, Vocalo, for a little over, it is November. So like 7.5 years. Wow. I started working there about 7.5 years. 7.5 years ago as a correspondent on the morning show at the time. It was called The Morning Amp. It was hosted by a brilliant woman named Molly Adams and a hilarious man named Brian Babylon, who folks might know from. Hey, yeah, he's great. He's a regular on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. He's a producer. He works a lot with Hannibal Buress these days.
Oh, wow.
And they'd have me in every other Friday or so to just talk about pop culture and whatnot. And a slot became open in the afternoons. I had been working at an independent internet station here in town called Chirp. And they, rigorous interview process. I sat with my boss at the time on a patio in the sun at the radio station, and we talked about the radio experiences of our youth in the 80s growing up in Chicago. And next thing I knew, I had a midday show on the sister station to our local NPR affiliate. So I did middays for a while, then got moved up to mornings when Brian moved to LA to produce Hannibal Buress' television show, and Molly moved to her hometown in Maine for some family reasons. And that was a great time. I did a lot of lots of social justice talk, lots of talk with up-and-coming artists here in town. And I had a co-host then. Long story short, I was doing the morning show, which kind of caught me by surprise, but I felt comfortable. I felt really good about it. And we had been doing this morning show for a while. And then, of course, COVID changes the whole game. You can't go into the studio anymore. Shared microphones, gross. Gross. We're not doing that. Shared doorknobs are even gross. And this thing, we're not doing that anymore. So working from home was a really interesting experiment those first couple of months. And now the afternoon show is double what I had in the morning to bring double the music, double the conversations. And I'm having such a good time so far. I really am. It's
quite a mix. It's R&B, it's hip hop, it's dance. You have a real breadth of what you can put on there.
Yeah, and on Thursdays today I get an hour to play rock music by women and people of color and people all across the LGBTQIA spectrum, and that's where my heart is right there.
Nice. Now, is that when you a lot of mainstream rock, a lot of indie rock? Like where are you going? Where are you diving in the crates, as they might say?
A lot of indie rock, and Chicago's a great indie rock town. Still is. I mean, our hip hop scene, our R&B scene is what people I think of these days. But people forget in the 90s we were in the mix with the Seattle conversation, and that never went away. So there's lots of great music coming out of here. And then also there's a jukebox that never gets turned off in here. So sometimes I'll just wake up with a bunch of songs in my head people haven't heard in a really long time, and I feel it's my due to bring them, I don't know, hobo humping slowbo babe on a Thursday at 15.
You hobo humping slowbo babe. Wow, I'm already into your station. Oh my gosh.
This is the rest of the show. Chris will just sing songs that Jill recommends.
Well,
what did you want to be when you grew up, Jill? Like, what was your vision for yourself when you were a kid?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to be like my mom. And I don't know that I really had like a job in mind. I just really wanted to be the kind of woman that Kim Hopkins is. She worked in a hospital when I was very young, and then worked for a real estate company later down the line, and like became a massage therapist. And then she was teaching preschool at a Catholic school. But everything that she did, I feel, in service of others, and to make people smile, and to make sure that you left a conversation with her feeling better than you got into it. And she's always been that way. But I don't know, I took dance classes. I was in like drama club in high school. So I've always, and my aunt and uncle had a theater company. So I just kind of figured I'd always work within the entertainment industrial complex.
I wanted to be Wonder Woman. That's what I was going to say.
I mean, I also wanted to be like Khadijah James from Living Single and run a hip hop magazine called Flava, but like that seemed out of reach. But I mean, hosting a radio show
outside of that universe, I was going to say like not too far.
Yeah.
All right, I got to give Hobo Humpin' Slowbo Babe. I had to look it up while we're talking because I'm like, I know that song, and it's from Whale. I knew that. I didn't remember anything about who Whale was. They're from Sweden. Like that's a really deep cut. So one, I get points because I knew the song.
Congratulations.
But two, what the hell? Like that's way out there. That's how your head works with music. You just like you're that far out on the edges.
That video, I think, made a real impression on a lot of people. It wasn't heavy rotation in all of MTV, but if you were a fan of like 120 Minutes or Alternative Nation, that was visually very striking. And then the audio that went with it is also just three people yelling at you basically for 4 minutes.
Absolutely. And Swedes of all people, they're not known for being especially mean and loud in their music. And Robert Collins says, of course, you guys are in deep crate diggers. That's
What'd you call me?
If you we use the D word around here, Jill. If you
yellow flag,
I would if I could. James Andrews has a deep connection to the music industry as well. You should know him after the fact here. In this land, one of the tweets I saw you share recently was that wonderful tweet from that poor black gay man who didn't get any help or support from Barack Obama.
Oh my God, what a year this week has been.
Are you, I mean, how does that filter into your show? It has to. You're talking about activism. You're talking about LGBTQIA and BIPOC. You're going all over those places where we have to be. Has the show always been that? Has the show amplified being that? Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, that's kind of baked in to bring your next guest's specialty into it. That's kind of baked into the fabric of not just the show, but the station. We do entertain, and because we're paired up with such a great news organization in WBEZ, we have the ability to get a lot of really great journalism pieces into our mix. So we have a lot of connections to folks who are doing important things, but who are also reporting on certain things. And we want to take advantage of that as much as we can. So we try to split the difference between making sure that voices, underrepresented voices, marginalized voices, have a place. And also, you know, here's some Bobby Brown. It's a tightrope. Actually, no, I don't feel as though it's a tightrope. It used to feel difficult, but there's such an overlap between music and social justice and politics and just culture in general that it doesn't feel compartmentalized in a way that maybe it did, 10 years ago.
No, I go right back to Nina Simone. I mean, the music and a
Yeah.
lot of the struggles kind of baked in together.
Oh yeah.
They're
I mean,
powerful.
there's Black music in the 60s and 70s especially was protest music just by virtue of existing in the
Right.
in the mainstream atmosphere. I'm not old enough to have ever been around working in radio where it was called race music, but I lived with my grandmother who always, I remember when we got MTV and my grandmother's just being like, why is Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie the only ones that we're
Right.
seeing?
Right.
And not to shade either of them, but just like in the early 80s, we were making moves and changing genres, inventing genres, and we still couldn't get play on MTV. So we just want to make sure that people who are doing interesting things musically, culturally, socially are represented, because this is a big city and we have a lot of radio stations and not all of them are dedicated to that. Not all of them should be, and I don't want them all to, but I'm glad that I work for one that prioritizes that.
And you podcast too, right?
New podcast, yes, with the folks from Consequence of Sound. Whoop whoop. A great music blog that is based in Chicago. They have a podcast called The Opus that I'm taking over the second year for, and our first episode of this cycle starts next week. We drop a week from today. We're taking a look. So the premise of the podcast is 3 to 4 episodes focusing heavily on one classic album. And we are starting Carlos Santana, or Santana's Abraxas. And that album has followed me like a stalker through my whole life. So I'm very excited to be able to talk to people about it. And it's iconic in its sound, but like the second you say the name, people can picture the album cover, and everybody knows Oye Como Va. Sometimes it's the only Spanish people know.
Right.
but it's been a pleasure to kind of live in that album for the past few weeks.
Plus, you got a chance to interview Carlos himself a bit, so that must have been super fun.
Carlos Santana is exactly what you think Carlos Santana is like.
I don't know. I doubt that. Did you ever see the Saturday Night Live sketch with Sergio, the sax guy that breaks through walls and just starts? That's how I picture Carlos Santana. Just breaks through walls and starts playing. Like whatever.
I imagine if his manager or something had not also been there, he would have just like kicked the door in and just started playing the guitar so smooth.
That's what I keep envisioning.
But no, he's a lovely person. He's just we talked about the album, but we talked a lot about just, I mean, so much stuff in that interview we're not going to be able to use because he was just talking about social issues, and it was the day after the election. I should mention that. So that was, they're like, please don't discuss politics with Mr. Santana. I was like, I don't want to talk about politics with anybody today.
But you know, if it's on your mind, it bleeds into your conversation. You can't help it.
Yeah, and he brought it up, so I wasn't gonna just be like, "No, Carlos Santana."
I like to use the full name. No, Carlos Santana. No,
Carlos Santana. It has to be the whole name.
Stop it, Carlos Santana. I do that to Chris. I'm like, stop it, Chris Brogan. Stop it.
So, or Dad. I've been told that you call me Dad a lot. So listen,
I do.
LinkedIn user who had a setting that makes them LinkedIn user says, I'm a bit curious who else is watching. The people who are watching right now are a blend of people who own different kinds of small businesses, people who work with lots of bigger businesses. Music people are here. There's
authors,
a few coaches, authors. Let's see who else I can see here.
Steve Garfield of SteveGarfield.com.
Steve
the original
Garfield,
video blogger.
That's right. Leslie, my friend who's in the school world, works in schooling.
It is an eclectic group.
The
Coach
people who
Woodard.
Coach Woodard.
We have people from Scotland.
Scotland is always in the house. Yeah, Nancy Ramsey was here a bit earlier. I don't know if she's still.
Chloe.
I want to say, Jill, one thing. You mentioned MTV maybe 3 times so far in this. Now, I'll put the date in the sand. I'm 50, so when MTV came out, I watched it until I passed out as often as I could. Yeah. Were you from that age where you like we all had to watch every video and see what was coming next?
Pretty much. I mean, I'm 41. That's not a huge amount of. I mean, I guess it was when you're a kid, but now it's like whatever. So I lived in a multi-generational household, which was huge to my cultural intake. So when we got MTV. And it was very youth focused. I was like, finally, something I can watch on my little TV without everybody else in the house giving a damn about it. Nice. And yeah, I was glued to MTV, and then later down the line, BET and VH1, just wherever I could take in this whole thing. And we had a lot of great radio stations that kind of aligned with that. There was. Growing up, I was a big Q101 was the station WKQX here in Chicago. And there was a DJ named James Van Osdell whose mission, it seemed, and still seems, is to, amplify local music. And, you would see like Urge Overkill or Liz Phair on MTV. But then you'd turn on the radio and you'd hear the demos, or you'd hear just other bands that were on tour. You'd hear like Triple Fast Action or, Cupcakes or whoever. Just and then you move out of the house. You're 19. You have a fake ID, and now you're running into these people at the bars.
What? No,
it's so strange.
So wait a second. Urge Overkill is a Chicago band.
Yes.
Oh, I can't even believe that. Sister Havana. That was a biggie. Anyway, I could do this. I could do this for a super long time.
You really could do this all day.
I can't. Yeah. Okay.
Cannon does on his other shows, but I'm here. So
I totally forgot to do this thing the entire time we were talking, which is you can find Jill at Jill Hopkins. I totally forgot to do all of this. Go to vocalo.org.
I would do it, but it would break my hotel internet.
She works on the moth. I had all these buttons I was supposed to push, and I was sitting here like, tell me more. So I was an idiot. So I'm pushing you backstage. Thank you so much. If you can, stick around for a minute. We're going to have a little panel at the very end. Stick around if you can. Oh, sorry.
She said, "You're so mean. I can't believe you put her back there. She was talking."
Jill's like, I'm a pro.
What is going on? And this just after
Doctor.
you were like, "I'm sorry I didn't show any of your web properties while we were talking. And also goodbye while you're talking."
Listen,
Chris Brogan, stop it.
this whiskey's not going to drink itself. Hey, if you want to make a better show than I obviously can make, we're sponsored by StreamYard. You can get your own little rubber ducky. You can go to your own little website, cbrogan.me/StreamYard. Pick up a copy of this. Look how cool and show-like this looks when somebody other than me makes this. Kerry can make this show anywhere in the world, evidently. So
that's true. You can actually join or even host from your phone if you have to. Like in a pinch, you could do it.
You totally do. So cbrogan.me/StreamYard. And authors, people who write books, book writers, bookmakers. If you are the kind of person who wants to put that site somewhere on the web and have people see what you actually do, get a chance to see where you're going to do your virtual book readings, buy your stupid book that no one cares. I mean, that people love. You can go to pub-site.com because it is the fastest, easiest, coolest, funnest way to make a website for authors specifically, so that you don't have to like snuffle around inside of Wix or Weebly or any of those other places.
Nope. It's got all the pieces you need. So it's got like all the things an author would need to promote. Those pieces are there for you to just assemble. It's super, super easy. If you don't want to do it, they'll do it for you. It's still super, super inexpensive. 14-day free trial. After that, it's just $19.99 a month. And if you want them to build your website for you, it's $499.
That's not anything.
I know.
2 to 5, 2 to 6,000 is about a website thing.
No.
And this website, pub site, costs less than my primary site, chrisbrogan.com.
It's so easy to use. We were on a call with them and we're like, what would be good is if we change this thing, and it was changed like seconds later. It's just so easy. So give it a try. And if you absolutely don't want to do it yourself, they'll build your stuff for you. Authors, go get it.
They're also a sponsor of Person of the Day. And today's Person of the Day will probably receive an ancient apple. It's going to be a very, very old apple.
Better than the apples we have today. They were simpler times.
Mr. Collins would like more Echo and the Bunnymen. I do not second that. Joanne says, great to hear that radio is still influencing even in the 90s.
Oh my gosh. My dad hated Paula Abdul. And when she was really big, it would come on the radio. He'd be like, I can't stand it. He was never like get off my lawn about anything, but he just didn't like Paula Abdul. Yeah.
She was forever my girl.
The funny thing was after she took singing lessons, like it was worse. Like he liked her less. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Carrie with a TRS-80 internet modem dial up.
Thank you, Bob.
A red card, which means I get ejected from the show.
Whoa!
I don't think I've earned a red card yet. I mean, I haven't. I mean, maybe with Ellie Gurevich, I'll pick one up. So now we're switching. Not. We've been talking ancient radio. Now we're going to talk ancient grains.
So ancient games, and what I was thinking was that when I researched some stuff. Well, so I like board games, like I said, and I was looking for. I think I found an article about ancient games. And I went looking for like an ancient games expert because I was thinking, who even knows how these games were played? Like that's some shenanigans. You find like a board and some pieces in like a tomb or something. You don't know what the rules were. You don't know who won. I need to know who won if I'm going to play some of these games. So anyway, that was my thinking, was like find somebody and figure out how they kind of reverse engineer how these games were played.
And so that's Ellie Gurevich.
Hello.
Hey, Ellie.
Hello.
What? Let's just start there because Kerry made a really important point. If I lost the rules to Monopoly, that game is over. Like I can't play that game anymore. I don't know. How did people pass the rules around?
So there are games that actually have been continuously played from like 5,000 years ago, and we still have the rules. So if you go to like rural Africa or rural Middle Eastern countries like Egypt or Saudi Arabia, people still play those games in the villages. And so kind of based on what we know about the rules today, we can reconstruct some of the ancient games which were similar, judging from the board and the pieces.
Interesting.
And then some of them are total guesses and are probably totally wrong.
But no one's around to tell you different.
Yeah, nobody can tell you the difference.
So what got you interested in this?
So I've been a scholar of Jewish ancient texts for like the last 25 years. And, the Talmud, which is like the ancient Jewish law book, it's a huge book that's dozens of volumes, and it talks about a lot of different aspects of life. And one of the things it mentions in a few places is ancient games that people played. And so when I read that, it kind of got me interested. I'm like, I wonder what they're talking about. And it wasn't until 2017 that I was traveling. I went with a friend on a trip to New York and Philadelphia to hit the big museums. So we went to the Brooklyn Museum and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And when we were in Philadelphia, we went to the Penn Museum. And in the Penn Museum, in the gift shop, they had a bunch of replicas of a few ancient games. And I was like, oh, I got to buy these and check them out. And so I bought a couple games. They're described on my website. One is called Senet. It's a game from Egypt. And the other one is the Royal Game of Ur, which is from Mesopotamia. And I opened up the box and their instructions, and I'm looking at these instructions and I'm like, this is total crap. I can't even play this game from these instructions. They're horrible. And I'm like, I got to figure out what the real instructions are. And so I started doing research, and it just kind of got me so into it that I'm like, I got to write about this. And so I started a whole website, and there are ancient games in almost every single country in the world. But I was kind of more interested, in the, let's say, Europe, Middle East area, because that's kind of where my roots are from. And so I focused on those games. But there are ancient games from South America and from North America and from Asia. And so I'll probably expand into those eventually. But so far I've been focusing on the Europe and Middle East region.
It's such a deep dive. Did you find Jumanji?
Yeah.
Do you play these games though, so you figure out what the games are?
Yeah, I tried to make my kids play with me, but they're like, this is boring. We want to play video games. And so I've played, but I haven't actually played every game as like an entertainment. I've played the games to try to figure out the rules and see how the gameplay is. But a lot of times it's hard to get people to play with you. They're like, what? This is weird.
It's interesting when you mention that the Talmud mentions games in a positive way. I'm curious to know.
No. So actually, that's a great question. No, they mention them in a negative way. So the two ways where they mention them is one, when they talk about Roman games. So Romans were big gamblers. And most Roman games, they were board games, but they were all gambling games where they played for money. And so one of the things that Talmud says is that people who play these games without talking about money, because they just assume you're gambling, are invalid witnesses in court because they're all liars.
Oh, all gamers are liars is the other.
Yeah, so because, they're gamblers and they're always cheating.
They are if they're playing Among Us, because you have to lie to win. Right.
And then the other mentioning, which is, it just tells you how much times have changed in 2,000 years. The other way it mentions, this is now in Babylon in modern Iraq. They said that if you're a rich guy and you have lots of slaves, and your wife does not have to do any house chores because there are all these other people in the house who are doing it for her, you have to keep her busy. Otherwise, she's going to go do naughty things. And so one of the ways to keep her busy is to get her to play board games.
That
Joke's on you. I would be like, we're playing Parcheesi. I don't know what you're talking about.
And I was like, you got to take all this, you kind of, when you read all that, you got to put your mindset back in the times where this was written. I know, like Today in the World was like,
what about
slaves?
What about the objectives of the games? Is there, like, do you see the society from which it originates reflected in the game itself, and like the objectives and the rules?
So interesting, yeah. So for example, Senet, which is like one of the more famous Egyptian games, it's really about passing into afterlife. So the game is a race game where the two players, they have a set of pawns, and they keep racing, and every time the pawns step on each other, they push each other back. So the goal of the game is to get to the end of the board. But as you go to the end of the board, there are a few hieroglyphic signs on the board. And all of those signs, they're representative of different steps that you take in the Egyptian religion to pass into the afterlife. And so it has like a trap where you fall into a trap and you go back 20 spaces because, I did the wrong thing and now my afterlife is all screwed up and I got to start again. And then there are other ones where you skip a turn or skip a step. Oh, I get a free pass to the afterlife. But everything was about really getting into the afterlife. So the game was like kind of I don't want to say a parody, but it was almost like, how do we get to afterlife in this world? Let's play this game.
It's like propaganda. It's like afterlife propaganda.
That's interesting to think about too. So one of the questions we have from a new visitor says, pretty interesting. I wonder what Ellie's favorite ancient game is.
So that's a great question. That changed. It was almost like in the beginning, I was like, well, I love Senet and I love the Royal Game of Ur. But then I was like, there was this one game called the Knossos game. It's from Crete. And there's still dispute. We only have one sample of it that was found in the ancient palace of Knossos on Crete from the Minoans. And they're still debating whether the board is a game or something else. Yeah, that's it. That's what the original looks like.
Oh, it almost looks like a battle plan or something. Yeah,
and I spent weeks on trying to figure out the rules for this game. And so I did create a rule set and I actually played the game. And it's a pretty good game, if you obviously play with my rules. We have zero indication. There are no texts of what this game, how it was played, and if it was a game at all.
Could have been plans for their summer house. Like, we don't know.
Well, the interesting thing is, so the Minoans lived on islands. It was basically two islands, Crete and Thera, which is Santorini today. And the game kind of represents island hopping. So you're basically like, if you can bring the picture of the game again,
sure.
That part in the middle is kind of like the big Aegean Sea. And then you're going from harbor to island hopping and then back to your harbor. And so it's kind of like a similar premise as Senet, where it's a race game, but it kind of represents the Minoan's life. It's like, well, we go on these ships and we go from island to island and we come back to our harbor, and that's kind of what the game represents. And I worked so hard on that reconstruction that it became my favorite game.
Really? And you don't even know if it's a game?
Not for sure, no. But it is fun to play. But it is fun to play.
That's very Pygmalion, Ellie. Like, I created Pygmalion, like you created the game.
Yep.
So then in the same family or slightly different family, because as you pointed out to me before we got talking, you have a lot of different web properties. You also created what would be of interest to people here, ancient recipes. And so that's an ancient McDonald's muffin.
It's like a McGriddle.
Yep. Those are some junior mints like you get at the movie theater. And talk about what brings you to these shores? What makes you say, I need to know about games. I need to make ancient vinegar. I need to make, I don't even want to know what that is.
Yes, you do. Stop it.
Upside down ice cream cone.
It's a
go ahead.
Tiger nut cake.
That's a cake?
But made out of a tiger's nut. It's very sweet, but tiger nut is an actual nut. But all my friends said, wow, that looks like beep, beep, beep.
Yep. It does. It looks like a phallus.
So they're the nuts. It kind of looks like maybe like peanuts or something when you see them all treated out. So a pile of dried tubers.
And so the recipe requires that you make it that shape.
Yeah, because with the recipe, I recreated this recipe from pictures on the Egyptian tomb of Ramses III. And there's no text. It's just pictures. So I talk about in the article about how I figured out what the recipe was.
Can you tell what it's supposed to be? Like, I mean, in the sense that did they eat it only on symbolic, like ceremonial occasions, or was it like an everyday thing? Is there any way to tell?
So we don't actually know when they ate it, but the tomb shows it's actually a sacrifice. So they baked the cake and brought it to the gods, and the priests ate it in the temples. But we don't actually know if like people bake something like this at home as well. I mean, they totally could. It's not that hard to make.
2 cups of nuts, a cup of honey liquid, and also a half cup of olive oil.
And you just slap it all together.
Yeah.
I could do that.
Put it on your container. You grind it all up a little bit. Because remember, this is ancient cooking. It's not like they had a food
these ancient
processor.
people are making a lot of sense to me.
And and this is pretty edible stuff when you get it all done. You form it into a shape of a poop. And
That's not.
Yeah.
What is? I don't know. You need to speak to someone, but it looks like a cone or something.
Sure, you say. So that's pretty interesting stuff. Ellie, where were you born and raised? Where did you grow up?
I was born in the Soviet Union, in Leningrad, which is today St. Petersburg. And I came to the U.S. in 1989 when I was just 11 years old.
Wow. So when you came over here, I mean, you by the way, and I put this in the little banner notes that you have like a real grown-up day job at but like what made you go down this road? And I imagine it's a little bit easier to look for this stuff now that the land of the internet has arisen. But you were a scholar before that.
Well, I've been kind of a scholar since my teenage years. You know, I was always a bookie and reading a ton, and I kind of got a classical Jewish education where, you know, you learn how to study Jewish ancient texts. And my style has changed over the years. I kind of went more the academia route than the classical route. You know, I guess call me a wannabe professor that never became a professor.
It's not too late.
No, it's not, but it kind of interferes with the day job.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
You could do adjunct. I mean, who wouldn't take a class about games?
I know.
Just sit there and play games.
Maybe I'll do it when I retire. I'll be like, yeah.
I would have signed up for that like on day 1, Ellie. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, thank you. But it's actually the Talmud that brought me to ancient recipes as well, because the Talmud talks about tons of different recipes. And the very first recipe that I got super interested in is this wine. It's called conditon. It's the very first recipe, and you can make this at home very easily. It's basically wine that is spiced. And the question that the Talmud asks, it says, well, can you drink this wine on Passover? Because, you know, we drink a lot of wine on Passover during the Seder night when we talk about the Exodus from Egypt. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason they asked the question is because, well, this is not regular wine. It's something you alter. So it's almost like becomes a drink of its own. And so, you know, when I saw that for the first time when I was a kid, I was like, okay, I don't really know what they're talking about. But then I started researching it, and I was like, okay, so I looked at ancient Greek texts and ancient Roman texts, and there's a Roman cookbook that we have called Apicius, which was actually, it's interesting because the modern consensus is that it was written by slaves who were cooks in the kitchen, and it was written for other slaves. So like if you look at the Latin in it, it's like really vulgar and like street slang, and but it talks about, it has hundreds of recipes in it, and 2 of the recipes are this conditon, this wine. I'm like, awesome, I'm gonna make it. And so I took the recipe from there and I made it, and it actually tasted great. So I fed it to a bunch of my friends, and they were like, oh yeah, we should totally do this again.
Was it like, is it like mulled wine sort of, or like what's it?
Yeah, taste like? It's very spicy, so it has like a bite to it. It's almost like if you ever smoked a cigar, you know how it burns your tongue.
Oh yeah,
totally. Yeah. So it's kind of like that. So basically, you just take wine that's already there, that's already made, and like in my recipe, I recommend using wine that you like, because if you're gonna take wine that you don't like, you might not like the end product either. So you take wine that you like of any kind, and then you add all these spices to it, and you cook it up, and the spices kind of infuse into wine, and you get this really pungy wine drink.
You had me at wine.
I love it. Listen, I'm gonna bring up one more comment, and then I'm gonna drag Jill back into this just to wrap ourselves back up. One more thing I want to say is that, if you want a better sense of some of what glues Ellie together, he's got a lot of different sites, and we didn't talk about them because they're a lot more esoteric. But he's got, for instance, a Sephirim database. Hopefully I pronounced that right. But Sephirim or Sephir is kind of like books and knowledge. Sephirim are the people who are like the transmitters of books and knowledge. So this quote from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says, "Our rabbis are blessed memory said, in the future, Torah will become forgotten from the Jewish people. Therefore, we should print a lot of books, and everyone should go and buy them in order that the book should be readily available. And because of the multitude of books, Torah should not become forgotten." So basically, if you don't push this information out, we're doomed, is kind of what I took from that quote. Is that sort of what drives you?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. That was actually my very first website. I created this website in 2000. It looked a little different in 2000. But yeah, back then Google Books still did not exist. So there was another guy who was doing another one called HebrewBooks.org. But I actually contacted him, and we were doing this together. So we started out, like, I literally was taking books from the library. I used to live in California back then. I used to go to the Berkeley University Library and just borrow books and scan them on a scanner page by page. And it was like, it took hours.
You were devoted to that copyright infringement.
Yeah. It wasn't copyright infringement. I was using actually stuff that's already out of copyright. And then Google came and they just scanned millions of books on a machine. Yeah. And it kind of became like, forget this.
Well, I'm going to drag Jill back in, but I mean, she's had an entire event going on at her house.
Yeah, what's going on with Jill?
I'm going to drag her right in, snack and all. Hey, Jill, I told you.
Now, is that ancient or is that like a modern bagel? What are we looking at? Just a normal one.
This toast is close to expiration, so it feels a little ancient.
I got to tell you something. So I'm listening to Ellie, and I'm like doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing as a host, and you're getting a massage. He's bringing you drinks. You got a man there. You got a man there.
If you can be married to a temporarily unemployed carpenter during the pandemic, I highly recommend it. Downstairs looks great in this house.
I would settle for it.
What a man. What a mighty good man.
Ooh, a chocolatier. We had Philip Ashley on.
I'm not going to lie. I forgot you guys could see me, but that's fine.
I even let you have a hint for a minute, but that's okay.
We could. You weren't like on with everyone watching you have your massage.
Everything was clean. It was fine. And it was a back scratch, and it was mostly to make the dog jealous.
Well, I have a lot of questions about that, but I'm just going to put those away.
We'll get back to that. Listen, one thing I thought about the two of you together is that you both seem to have in common that you both really want to keep knowledge flowing that might otherwise fall through the cracks. And while Jill's is a little bit more contemporary, it has some comparisons to what Ellie was talking about. For instance, a recipe book that slaves passed to slaves in ancient Rome, or, the fact that the Talmud said you can't play games because you're a gambler. You both are pushing for information to stay alive in different ways. Jill, did you feel that? Do you feel that sort of resonance when you were hearing some of this?
I do. I think that food and games are just a subset of storytelling. And that's how traditions get passed down. And I'm so glad that there are people like Ellie who are making sure that those ancient stories get told. You can tell a lot about a society by what they've eaten and how they pass the time. And this falls into line with so much of the work that the folks at the Moth do.
Is ancientmusic.org on your horizon, Ellie?
No, I'm actually tone deaf, so music is tough for me. I love listening to it, but I can never reproduce it.
Oh no.
Ancientcomedy.org.
Ancient comedy. It's funny back then. No.
Pull my bast mask. Yeah.
How did you figure out, Ellie, that the Latin in the cookbooks was like street Latin? Like how?
So I'm not a Latin expert, but people who are, they basically said this is not like the Latin of the classical authors. This is like what, your riffraff on the street would say.
My people.
Yeah, kind of like it's just not. I mean, Latin has, they call it the dead language, but it's actually never been dead. It's been spoken. It's spoken still today in the Vatican by the Catholic Church. And so Latin has had a continuous history from the very beginning. So we know how they spoke it back then and how it changed over the years.
It's not like anybody in the Vatican is saying the street Latin.
Right.
They're definitely
right.
above board.
It's about secret languages, though, too, isn't it? Because what Jill was saying about all songs were protest songs at that time and everything like that. It's about secret languages, like the quilts in American slave time, where the quilts would tell us something about the houses without anybody who didn't know that language not knowing. It just feels like there's a lot to that. So we're at the point of the show where we have to pick our person of the day, and then we have to ask you a question. So I'm going to give you the question so you can think about it. Don't answer just yet. The question we ask everybody is, what goes in your backpack? So it could be a game of Senate. Could be, Living Color with Corey Glover, first CD. It could be whatever. It could be something like something more metaphorical, like hope and dreams. So that's the question of what goes in your backpack. Before that, we're going to do Person of the Day. Person of the Day is sponsored by PubSite, pub-site.com. It's chosen rather arbitrarily. There's almost never any particular reason why.
Not like a rubric.
Nope. You don't have to go through anything particular. But you know who I want? I want Rick Charlie. I can't even remember if I ever gave him one yet, but he is the dude on music. He said the dude on music is watching, and I think that Rick is a good add-on because he was vibing, as the kids say, with Jill's part of it.
I agree.
I hate vibing.
I concur. You didn't ask me. It wouldn't matter at all.
I never do. Rick, you're entitled to one free apple, just like that one. I would actually recommend buying an ancient apple, though. They probably have ancient apples.
You could get ancient apple seeds and they grow.
They actually do. Again.
See,
it's on my website.
So
not the apples, but other fruit like dates and figs and stuff. Yeah,
that's really so old dates. But if I have some really old dates, I'm going to make monkeys eat them first to determine if someone's trying to kill me before I find the Ark of the Covenant.
If we're going to talk about your really old dates, it's going to get awkward. We'll start with high school. Date before then.
Let's go back to this question. Wait a minute. I got to find something. All right. Okay. So let's start with Jill. Jill, what is something that goes in the backpack, either metaphorical or physical, help people make the next 5 years a better place?
I'm putting in my backpack the first 3 Pearl Jam albums. Those would travel with me anywhere. 10 Verses and Vitalogy. Next year is the 30th anniversary of 10, and that really just smacks you in the face with mortality. But also, I think along with those first 3 albums, I put 3 things that kind of shape my work: humility always, curiosity always, and gratitude always, and also, mid-grade vodka.
Mid-grade, not the worst, but we don't have to get all
worst
on anybody.
$30. We'll spend like $22.
I like your thinking. Ellie, I cannot wait to know what goes in the backpack for you.
For me, I would put a light, like a flashlight, that shines when all other lights go out, to quote a little bit of Lord of the Rings over there.
Nice.
Yeah. The Jewish tradition says that books are a shining light that kind of illuminate our lives and people and traditions. And I think that's what we need, more of this now in these slightly darker times.
I'll take it. I couldn't have expected anything better. Ooh, that was a good one.
You want like a really old Monopoly or something?
Really old Monopoly.
I mean, they're probably still playing that game. There's ongoing games of Monopoly.
A lot of these games, people play them. I actually have a couple YouTube videos that are like just from the last 5 years on the games website, on the blog part. And there are people playing them in villages. They literally they take a stick and they draw a board on the dirt in the ground, and they take a bunch of rocks, and those are their playing pieces, and take a bunch of sticks and play games. And then when it's over, the wind just blows it all away and it's gone.
Very eco-friendly.
Yeah, you don't need to carry anything.
Well, one thing I'll say about that, Nice torch, by the way. That's a great one. One thing I'll say is that the most ancient game I ever played early was with my grandmother at the table with all these other people, and it was penny nickel poker. And the first time I ever played poker, it turned out I wasn't so bad at it, and I took a lot of people's money. But then I just wanted to just leave, and everybody wanted to get their money back from me, and they wanted to kind of like rough me up a little. But I'll tell you, my Grammy stepped in.